Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at the Emax TinyHawk II. It features the same all-in-one flight controller ESC that we saw on the TinyHawk S. It's a 5 amp ESC and an F4 flight controller. The TinyHawk II has 08, 02, 16,000 kV motors. The same 4-bladed props we saw in the S version. We've got the RunCam Nano 2 now as a camera with adjustable angle, and the VTX is now upgraded. It's power switchable from 25 milliwatts to 100 milliwatts to 200 milliwatts. It still comes locked, you have to unlock it. The TinyHawk II weighs just over 31 grams. With a 1S battery, it weighs just over 44 grams. With the 2S battery, it weighs 46.7 grams. And yes, it does come with LEDs. It does come with two batteries, a 1S 450 milliamp and a 2S 300 milliamp. It also comes with a 4-port USB charger. It can charge to high voltage as well. An extra set of props. I lost one. A baggie full of accessories, got a little screwdriver, got a battery lead, 2 rubber bands, and various other screws you might need. We've got the same warning card telling us to switch the profile to profile 2 for 2S, but Betaflight's set up to do that automatically. A fold-out instruction guide. Yes, there are stickers, and it all comes inside this carrying case. So as we start on this flight, I am flying the 450 milliamp battery, just like the Emax one. I can't say for certain it is the Emax one. I've got a bunch of these batteries. I charge them all up at night, and then I have a flying session the next day, typically over my lunch hour. And I think something you're going to find, because the weight difference between the TinyHawk II and the TinyHawk S is we have less flight performance and we have less flight time. That's going to be a running theme for me, at least through this. The TinyHawk S had that really lightweight camera. It had a lot of lightweight components. We've added a substantial number of grams. The TinyHawk S, if you go back and look at my review, you'll find that the TinyHawk S came in under 28 grams. So it's something to consider, especially when it comes to indoor flying, that we don't have the flight time that we would. It's likely due to mainly the weight that we've added. We've got an additional camera weight. We've got a canopy around that camera. The frame may also be a little bit heavier than the original. It's hard for me to say. We've got a tiny amount of weight with some extra wiring for those LEDs. So all these things add up. But when I look at this, I think of it in the fact that if you're looking at the TinyHawk series, Emax has got something for you. If you want the 200 milliwatt and the VTX, so you can get better range and reception, they've got that. If you want the better camera, they've got that. If you want LEDs, they've got that. If you want 4-minute flight time, they've got that. If they want a little bit additional flight performance over the TinyHawk II, they've got that. So while these might not be the fastest, lightest indoor quads, especially the ones you've seen on this channel, they're an improvement or a feature set of the TinyHawk series that you get to pick and choose what it is that you're looking for. You're going to find from time to time I have a little bit of a hard time gaining altitude, and if you go back and watch that TinyHawk S video, you'll also find that I'm flying faster. So the flight time is, as you can see with the voltage here, it's going to be about 2 minutes and 20 seconds flying in my space at the pace that I fly. I have found that turtle mode didn't necessarily work as well on 1S as it did in 2S. I also felt turtle mode worked better on the TinyHawk S than it does on the TinyHawk 2, especially on slick surfaces as I'm skittering around here. So unfortunately, I'm showing you a crashed out flight, but I thought this was fairly important because it is a significant difference. So this is 2S now, as you can tell from the voltage in the lower right-hand corner, and you can see a little bit of my whoops. I've changed my camera angle. I actually played with this quite a bit. It was really difficult for me to fly this one on 2S in the house. And those that have been around the channel, you know I fly 2S in the house all the time. But what's different is this one has a big lump of thrust right at the lower end of the throttle, which you desperately needed, which, you know, flying in a home, I needed that linear throttle control in order to be able to fly it effectively. I spent a lot of packs running through this on 2S because I really wanted 2S. I actually prefer 2S in my house, but unfortunately in this particular case, with that big lump of thrust right there around, I think it's around 15% throttle, you'll notice that I'm kind of bobbling up quite a bit. Almost like porpoising, I think they call that in airplanes, where you're coming up and you're going down. I can't really hold my attitude. I'm not nearly as smooth as I normally am. It could be the particular flight sessions I had on 2S. I just wasn't as an accomplished pilot. Maybe my skills fell off, or I had other things going on in my life that was bothering me. But this was something I actually tried quite a bit to do, was to smooth out my flights, and it got to be quite a challenge. So I think when it comes to 2S flight and inside, it's really much more durable in a place that is bigger than a home, at least bigger than my home. You know, you don't have a big margin for error when you've got ceilings and all these little knickknacks and furniture bits all over the place. So you're going to need to maybe have a warehouse or a gym, or maybe you've got a large industrial office or something of that nature that you can fly in. And that will probably work a lot better because it'll be a lot more forgiving because of that big lump of thrust. There are other things you can do to kind of smooth out that big lump of thrust, but I felt it important to review these things without making a host of changes. This does come professionally configured, so that's another feature that I think is important to highlight. Now, one thing I did take out is the expo. It comes with a fair bit of expo. I took that out because I fly really poorly with expo, so that's the one configuration change I did make to the quad in order to be able to review it. Flight times on this, as I said, we're towing a heavier quad, is less than what we saw on the TinyHawk S, but again, it has those extra features if you want those features. This is our outside flight, 1S, just kind of a proof of concept. I've talked about this before. This form factor, and this isn't something specific about the TinyHawk series, these don't fly necessarily well outside. You can go outside and fly them. And on this day, it was pretty calm. It wasn't dead calm, but that's kind of an important factor, is if you live in an area that generally has some wind, and I'm talking minor wind, like this day you can see it in my flight path where I'm fighting the puffs of wind. And I call it puffs because I think it was less than 3 or 4 miles an hour. But it just has an impact when you're not carrying very much weight, and the less weight you have means it's even harder to control your flight path. I took a number of attempts to try to execute some of the more precision flying around the swing set there of the kids, and I would get blown off my path quite a bit. This is probably the best of the group to where I was able to avoid the swing set when those puff of wind would come up, and then I would dive back into kind of having some fun with the swing set when the puff of wind would then go away. So that's something to keep in mind with these things, and again, that's not specific to the TinyHawk. Whenever you have these whoops that are really light, they're mainly designed around indoor windless performance, and if you want that performance, you're just not going to find it outside. It's flyable. You can go out and learn and have a good time, but it's not going to perform like you might expect it to. We do some speed runs, and I kind of wondered why I haven't done this in the past, so I just do some speed runs back and forth across the yard just to kind of give you a sense of the speed, because I think some people that come to the channel that are relatively new, they'll ask how fast it is, and you know, I kind of have to give them my subjective view of whether it's as fast as one or as fast as another, but that speed run should help you, although I don't do it very often. Matter of fact, I think I've only done it probably 2 or 3 times in the 400 or 500 videos that I've got on the channel. We have another crash, and we're going to pick it up because turtle mode does not work. I had something obstructing a prop. I could hear it, so I didn't want to risk burning an ESC, so I went and picked it up. We put it back on the table to finish out the flight so that you can get a feel for the outside flight time that you'll get on a 1S 450 milliamp battery. .2S outside flight time. Now on 2S, something I should have mentioned when we started showing the 2S footage is the digital idle is set at 5.5, and I actually think that's a little bit high. I think it should be at the default 4.5, but I didn't change it. And the reason behind that is I found when you activated or armed the machine that with air mode on, it wanted to skitter around the ground, so that digital idle wanted to make it take off. I did mention it in the quick roll that they have configured Betaflight on this so that you don't have to manually switch PID profiles when going between 1S and 2S, and that actually caught me out a little bit. It's set up, there's a setting in Betaflight where it can count the voltage of your batteries, and if it comes to a certain amount, then it can switch the PID profile, and it does that for you, which I think is a great feature, especially for people who are getting started. I might forget to switch their PID profile depending upon the battery they're running, whether it's a 1S or 2S battery. So that's a nice feature. Again, you're not going to find long flight times on 2S. You could use larger 2S batteries, but it has that unique PH20 connector on there. You can get RDQ 300 milliamp batteries. They're not any bigger than the Emax ones, but if you wanted to add more to your collection for more 2S flight, I think 2S flight is a lot more doable outside for me than it is inside. I just felt that lump of thrust down there at the low end where I needed that fine control, I just didn't have it in order to be able to pull off the flight that I like to show you guys, something that looks fun and is a reasonable demonstration of the machine and how it performs in that sort of flight manner. But you can see we get about 2 minutes of flight. We get some low battery warnings through our OSD that comes up. I go ahead and kind of feather back off the throttle a little bit to milk that battery and get some more flight time on it, because you know, you can do that too. It's not as though I'm trying to hide anything from you. You know, you go on longer stretches of cruisy flight to still have some fun. So if you like to go hard and fast and you want to go outside, I wouldn't suggest this format at all. I wouldn't suggest any hoop format, but maybe if you're someone who's getting started or you have only one working quad at the time and it's this one, you can step outside and go for a fly. 2S is going to be a little bit more fun than 1S, in my opinion. I mentioned in the flight footage how RaceDayQuads RDQ has 2S batteries with this PH20, so you can order those if you find that you want to try new batteries or you find that the Emax batteries are out of stock where you try to purchase them from. But I did want to show you that because I did use those quite heavily in my 2S flights. A couple of other little details. There's not a whole lot to cover as this is just an iteration over the previous ones. If you see right down in there, that's the connector for the camera into the VTX. So if you did need to replace the camera, it wouldn't require any soldering. But the LEDs are soldered on as well as the motors. So replacing the motors, as you can see right up here, those are our motor sockets. They're not using those. They're soldering those on, and I did confirm from Emax that those motors will come soldered on. So that means if you're a newer pilot or new at soldering, or soldering isn't a skill you're comfortable with, that if you do happen to burn out a motor or damage a motor and you need to replace it, that you will have to solder those back on. I don't know if the LEDs will still work if you tried to use the connector instead. I haven't tried that myself, but that's something I wanted to make aware. Also, the LEDs tend to come out like this. You can see how it comes out. It's not a big deal, but I noticed it. It was kind of catching on the carpet sometimes when I tried to turtle mode. I think an easy fix for that is to just take some masking tape and wrap it around there just a little bit. It wouldn't hurt your weight hardly at all, and it's a household fix, so you don't have to do anything special. Of course, there's hundreds of ways that you could remedy that issue with these little LEDs. They are threaded through. Hopefully you can see that. They are threaded through this frame, so they shouldn't come out, but you might get little ends that come out like that. The bind button is right there by my fingertip. That's how you bind your radio to the machine. And then the VTX button is right back here. You press that and you plug in power either via USB or through the battery lead, and that will then unlock the VTX so that you can get to all channels. It's not 48 channels, it's 37 channels, so you don't have all bands at your disposal, but that keeps you legal, at least here in North America. I suspect it comes that way to all countries, but it might come to your country differently. I just can't verify that. And maybe a little bit of a closer look at that edgy style of frame. You know, initially when I saw this, because the Tesla truck had launched, I kind of had my thoughts about this, but I kind of like this. And but that's personal preference. You need to take a look at it and decide whether you like it or not. I think there are advantages to what they've done here for people who might be involved in spec racing. You have the camera angle that's adjustable, and these mods were being done by hobbyists with the original TinyHawk and the TinyHawk S. People were adding in their own VTXs. People were adding cameras. There are prints available for the original. This is what Emax has done. They saw what you guys were doing and decided to implement those changes. So now if somebody else wants that but isn't a tinkerer, that they can just go out and buy it. You should find the price point to come in around $109. I can't be certain of that at all shops. You may find it comes in a little bit less at other shops. I'll add links down below to the places where I know it's available currently. I only have a link down there to the Emax shop, but other vendors will surely come along and be adding this to their inventory. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.